All right, George, how are you doing, buddy?
Good evening. Good evening, Turkey and the rest of the world.
That's
West of
right.
the
We've got another edition of Two Chimps Typing, abbreviated, with one chimp and special friends. Tonight in the house, we have George Kent, and entering the room now, Peter W. Murphy. And shortly, Jake will be along. Hi, Peter. What's going on?
America. America, fuck yeah. Coming
right.
again, this is the motherfucking day, yeah. America, fuck yeah.
Exactly.
There we go.
Have you just come back from Nam, Peter?
Yeah, America.
And I just got back. I just got back. I told you we were pulling out of Afghanistan a few podcasts ago, and we did it.
Yeah.
We're not out of there yet. We have till September 11th.
Well, I am.
Did you hear the news though that November 9th, so 6 days after the election, Trump had a memorandum drafted in which he wanted to pull all the troops out of Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. He wanted to pull 80% of the troops out of Germany. So he wanted to completely throw a wrench in the system for Biden when he took over in January. And that bombshell came out tonight. Jake Newberry, welcome to One Chimp and Friends. Good to see you, birthday boy.
How's it going?
A little bit
Hey,
late.
Jake.
I like your American flag, Betty.
How old are
Thanks,
you?
man.
Jake?
This is actually a good.
It's a Malaysian flag, though.
No, this is actually a guitar strap that I bought because
Oh.
I wanted to impress Martin.
Oh, Martin, are you impressed?
No, I'm embarrassed.
He was very, he was very angry. Actually, he got very violent.
very violent. I don't remember that, but maybe I
I
did.
missed that. God damn it.
You missed the
I
violence.
told you. Don't say my name in public.
So
Get back on the bus, you immigrant.
oh boy, here we go. It's your boss, Peter. She just can't help herself. Friday night.
Gone.
This is
CIA got him.
Oh my
Fine,
God,
man.
our leader, what are we gonna do?
this is her equivalence of having a drink, is sending messages in the WhatsApp group on a Friday night.
Who's this?
Your boss, actually.
Oh, right. Okay. Let me check.
So
Your
yeah,
boss.
I you may remember way back, George, when you gave me that box of filters, I said one of two things will happen first. Either I'll die or I'll quit when I get to the very last one. And so that's what I did. I stuck to my guns.
Oh.
Got to the very last one, and that was it. So but in retrospect, that was like 1,200. That was 1,200.
Wow. Think about that.
Yeah.
1,200 cigarettes.
So I polished them up right, and that doesn't even include all the special cigarettes. So
8 months ago. 8 months ago.
was it that long ago?
8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, there were large periods of time where they weren't being used at all because I was not using any filter at all because, as I said, they were the Indian cigarettes. And so, but yeah, so obviously in a much shorter period of time without the Indian cigarettes, I obviously, I say Indian cigarettes because we're reading Sherlock Holmes stories, and there's in the Speckled Band, the stepfather was, he was a doctor and he worked in Calcutta. So when he came back to England, he used to smoke these Indian cigarettes that had a strong smell. And so kind of the running joke in my mind was, oh, that's what he called them. Because that reminds me of when I was in Kenya. That reminds me of when I was in Kenya, and the security guard came pounding on my hotel door one afternoon, demanding, for me to open the door. And I opened the door, and he said, the people, they say you're smoking the, I can't remember what he called it, but you know, he basically had some like word for it that was like, you know, obviously it's not Christian. Whatever you're smoking is not Christian. And so the people in the hallway,
Satan's lettuce.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. So the people in the hallway snitched on me, and I was like, bro, no, this is Turkish tobacco. He's like, well, let me see this Turkish tobacco. So fortunately, wisely, I brought Turkish tobacco, and I showed him the bag. I said, the reason why it's so popular is because of its smell. So he told everybody in the hallway to fuck off. It was Turkish tobacco. It's only Turkish tobacco.
Because of Sherlock Holmes, we call it Indian tobacco, and the whole of Kenya is calling it Turkish tobacco now.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know?
That's right.
Yeah, it's probably spread.
Coining the phrase.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. But you know, I should say, the Indians have a strong presence both in Ethiopia and in Kenya and in Uganda. So you know, Indian cigarettes found their way in Kenya because I got a pack of those Indian cigarettes the first morning I woke up in my hotel. I had them delivered to me, and they came in a pack, right? And there was 20 cigarettes in a pack, and they were spectacular. I was very pleasantly surprised. It was the kind of thing where if you remove the paper so that you can conserve on the tobacco, they maintain their form. They didn't just crumble, you know. They maintained.
Oh, really?
Their form. Yes, it was amazing. It was really impressive.
I think the most popular. You're talking about Indians in Africa, and the most popular Indian Ugandan person, Jake, is Preeti Patel, who is the British. She's the Interior Minister. You would have in any other country.
Home Secretary.
Home Secretary, yeah. And of course, I don't know, Jake, if you've seen now because they're doing like deportations, right, in the UK. You saw what happened in Glasgow.
I saw it in Glasgow. Yeah, it was mad.
Yeah. But like Preeti Patel, she's actually going with the deportation people to immigrants' houses, and then they're bundling them in the van, and she's watching. She's the Home Secretary, and she's wearing the coat and everything.
There's no irony. Yeah,
it's like mad. What a woman!
She's hard. Like her husband called her piranha.
Like bloody hell.
It's like a piranha lady. That's her husband.
He meant to say barracuda, but it came out piranha.
No, she's tough as nails. Her, she's hard. Preeti Patel.
That's mad. Like you know, she don't
ruthless.
give a shit. Man. Like
no, she's ruthless. Yeah, she's absolutely. She kind of like revels in it, innit?
So, Jake, you missed it. You missed it last weekend, you know.
I did.
Do you have any thoughts? Now, we kept it kind of tame, and then I sort of got a little bit agitated at the end. A little bit agitated at the end, but obviously another week has gone by, and a couple things that occurred to me through the week is these tropes and these well-worn excuses that are always thrown out there whenever something like this happens. And one thing that is said over and over again is about how the justification that the Israelis use, or the IDF uses, whenever they bomb places where civilians are in place, one of the go-to things is, well, Hamas is using their civilians as human shields. And if you hear that just on the face of it and you don't think about it for a moment, you're like, oh, okay, so they're using them as human shields. Well, what is a shield, right? A shield is to protect you, right? But Israel, the IDF is not hesitating to bomb those areas anyway. So it's kind of stupid for Israel to say that Hamas is using human shields when Israel doesn't respect the humanity of the so-called human shields to begin with, right? Because they're bombing anyway.
Yeah, but also as well, there's no place. Essentially, it's an open air prison, and there's no place for
Yeah, that's
Hamas to go either. Like, they have. It's a city. It's Chamlock and Denizli, or Chinar is. It's just tower. People living in apartments and stuff, and they got nowhere to go. It is essentially shooting. It's a horrible analogy, sorry, but shooting fish in a barrel. You know what I mean? There's like nowhere for them to go, nowhere at all.
No.
But yeah, it's just like any action in Gaza, it is an act of it's an act of it's a crime of humanity, really, isn't it? Because you will end up killing children.
The point I'm making though is that Israel is trying to throw Hamas under the bus by repeating this idea that Hamas uses their people as human shields. And it's like, well, wait, what's worse, using people as a human shield or targeting all the people, human shields and all, and killing them, right? See, that's the thing. Israel's not even like keen enough to figure out that it's bullshit is that transparent and easy for us to see. But it's like, if Israel was unable to carry out bombing missions or execution missions against Hamas because they were using civilians as human shields, well, then that would be a justified thing to say, right? To come on the news and say, well, we can't kill the terrorists because they're using people as human shields. But that means nothing to Israel.
Yeah, when they do the action anyway, yeah.
They do the action anyway. Yeah.
Like you look at Gaza, and Jake mentioned it, it's what is it, 25 miles this way and 12 miles that way or something. It's a tiny strip of land that's blockaded. You can't go anywhere. You can't travel. Like, can you imagine living in somewhere like that all these years? You're bound to lose your fucking mind and get
definitely
anyway.
100%.
I know I would vote for Hamas if I lived there, because I'd be off my rocker if I lived.
But it's I was thinking about it today. It's so depressing. Like, as in they've tried. I was thinking, like, they can't win militarily to improve their situation. Can they try Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, or Nelson Mandela type strategy? Yeah, well, that's what I thought, because remember a couple of years ago they walked to the wall, and I was thinking, oh yeah, what if they walked to the wall and just demand? And I remember, and they all got shot down, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right.
They did that. They walked to the gate peacefully, and then they killed medics. Do you know what I mean? They they shot just sniper rifle people, just shooting. So it's quite depressing, really, isn't it? Because they've tried
that girl.
Everything. They've tried, and it is. What's that? Sorry.
Tamini, the blonde-haired Palestinian girl, the curly one.
She had a Western name.
I know the name.
What was her name? She had a Western name.
They ran so many doctors getting shot in the fucking back, kids getting shot. There's a litany, there's a list as long as my arm, of all these are martyrs basically, and that's pretty like fundamentalist words. This is strong words, but that's what essentially they are. The thing is with Nelson Mandela was, he was able to, conjure up global sympathy for what was going on in South Africa, but we're still. Well, I would imagine 60% behind the Palestinians now globally.
I have one word.
Yeah.
Holocaust.
That's right.
Right.
Well, that's the problem.
If there was some other thing for South Africa or India or anything like that, they, who knows? But anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. No one should be anti-Semitic, of course. and the Holocaust was awful, and I wish it never happened, and it was a great tragedy, like a genocide. But it doesn't give you free range to then get, hey, we got this thing where we can, like you said in the last podcast, do this thing that we want to do, and we can use this as like, hey, anybody who says anything against us, they're like they're anti-Semitic.
Well,
Basically.
it's their human shield, isn't it? It's their Holocaust shield, right? They're using it,
yeah.
and so and you know,
Well, it's so powerful. It's so powerful as well for like I think like what George Point said about like, you know, Nelson Mandela did manage to get this kind of popular global opinion against apartheid. And I think they've looked at that, the right-wing Israeli government, and they're thinking, okay, how can we stop that from happening here? And they've embedded themselves as in lobbyists, you know, in donors, in Western democracies, like in the UK, in America, and they've come up with this whole thing of any criticism, any slight criticism of the policy of Israel is classed as anti-Semitic to try and shut it down. Like, and it's ridiculous. And I mean, the worst thing is, sorry, my last little point on this as well is the worst thing is, all right, you know, you have reasonable people saying, look, I don't like what you're doing against the Palestinians, and they scream anti-Semitism at you. And the problem is when real people are doing damage, like, you know, there were gun attacks in synagogues in America, for example, you know, right-wing people in Charlottesville shouting the Jews will not replace us. There's nothing being said about that. So eventually when that far-right Nazism, you know, rears its ugly head again, and people say, oh, anti-Semitism, people will think, oh yeah, you called everyone else anti-Semitic. Oh, why should we? You know what I mean? And then it goes, you know,
called anti. I agree with you, Jake, because being called anti-Semitic is supposed to be something that equates you with Hitlerism and Nazism, and now they are watering it down so much that the word has lost any true meaning. Like this, it holds no water. It's
and
like
shame on people who do that, mind, as well, because they, like, the ones who scream anti-Semitic are people who have a logical, you know, points against the right-wing government of Israel. Shame on them, because at the end of the day, they are diluting the memory of all those people who died in the Holocaust.
I mean, we all,
you know what I mean? So shame on them, you know?
But
absolute shame on them.
The same thing is happening with racism. It's like, to be called a race, like when I was growing up, if you were called, even up until just about like 7 years ago, and it still is, I'm not saying it's not, but especially 5-6 years ago, to be called a racist by someone, I've never been called a racist, thank God, but like to be called a racist by someone is almost like, you know, it's bloody terrible. Like it's a huge mark on your name. But now in the media, it's like, is this person racist? Because we had the Sharon Osbourne thing on this podcast a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Like, are you racist? It's like, hang on a second. This is a very serious thing. You want to bring up that word, you better make sure that they fit that criteria and not hum and haw about it.
Well, in the case of Sharon Osbourne, it was well placed.
It was well placed. Yeah, well, I don't think she's racist, though, is she?
I didn't follow that story too.
I know that.
She's 100% racist. 100%. 100%. She talks smack about people on the show that were like Holly Robinson, Pete. And, you know, what it is that she doesn't think she's racist doesn't mean she's not racist. Because
but they didn't bring that up. They said that she was racist because she was friends with someone who disagreed.
That's not what they know. They did not do that. That's what she tried to change the narrative to be, so that she could play the victim. But the truth is, going back in the past, there are many things that she said, and the way that she said them about coworkers and people around her that expose her as being racist. And she just didn't know that shit thrown out in the street. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I'm glad she was canceled.
Peter, your point is still relevant, though, because I mean, they've gone so far as to call Bernie Sanders an anti-Semite.
Well, but see, this
The guy
actually
is Jewish,
proves my
like,
point.
you know what I mean?
Because
Exactly, and that's like, that's as far as they can go, and they've gone there. They've equated a Jewish person as Hitler, basically. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
but
It's like,
see, this proves my point, because what Martin just said there kind of proves my point. I no longer know what's real and what's not real. You know what I mean? Because it's been thrown around so much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now the thing is,
it's been thrown around so much that I'm just kind of like, well, is she? I don't know. I mean, apparently, like you said, Bernie Sanders is, and anybody who opposes what killing children in Palestine is now anti-Semitic, and you know, this person is that because they said that in 2001. It's like, I don't know anymore. Like, and the same thing with Armenia. Like, we had that podcast. It's like they're changing the. I still don't know about that thing.
It goes back to Hillary Clinton's campaign as well. They called Bernie Sanders sexist, and there's like no evidence of it. Well, Bernie Bros, that whole thing they made up, you know, and they do dilute the word.
But listen, that was designed to destroy the momentum of his campaign. So we have to make a distinction. The people who accused him of that do not believe that it's actually true. It was spitballing. It was throwing something at the wall and see what sticks. So,
and it's what happened with Corbyn as well, because like Corbyn's very pro-Palestine, and they kept throwing stuff they couldn't stick, and then anti-Semite. And it just took a life of its own. I don't, and loads of people in the UK believe that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic. Like, they believe to their core.
There's a YouTuber that I've watched a handful of his videos now. I guess he's like an American Jewish guy, and probably a citizen of Israel, because anybody can be a citizen of Israel if they're Jewish. So he goes around asking people these questions that are written in for him by viewers. And quite a lot of the questions that he asks are from Palestinian people. And they're
I love that.
They're asked to Jewish people, not always, but a lot of times. So he'll ask questions like, did you know that Jews in this region were safer under Muslim control than they were when they lived in Europe? And then he asked questions like, what if the Romans wanted to take their land back? Because, you know, the Romans were here a couple thousand years ago. What if the Romans wanted to take their land back? Would
not long ago,
right? Yeah. And then
that's the latest.
They said, what if it was proven that Palestinian people were genetically Jewish? Would that change your opinion about? So there's all of these questions like, who were the original people of this land? Was it Palestinians? Was it Jews? Was it Canaanites? So some obviously provocative questions that are asked of people, just to kind of like see living in a bubble of misinformation, and who's willing to answer the questions, because some people aren't willing to answer the questions because they feel like it's a wind up, or they're kind of concerned that they would say something publicly which later would come back to haunt them. You know, there's a lot of this, a lot of different.
Who's going to decide on the timeline? Who's going to decide on the timeline? That's the thing. Is it 10 years? Is it 100 years? Is it 1,000 years?
Well, that's right.
Like, how far back do you go?
Yeah.
Is there a statute of limitations for this?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no,
and something that always gets in mind here as well is, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on, George.
Well, I'm just like, the anti-Semitism, is hatred towards Semitic people. Arabs are Semitic people. Don't forget that as well. Arabic is a Semitic language. But anti-Semitism now, it's either, you know, the goalposts have been shifted, or they're in the process of being shifted, or they want to shift them. Whereas if you don't think that Jews should have a homeland, a state of their own, i.e. Zionism, then that means that you are anti-Semitic, right? You could get into lots of trouble here, yeah? So you could believe that Jews deserve their own homeland, or you don't think they should. Regardless, I don't think that makes you an anti-Semitic, because do you think, for example, there are Kurdish people.
It makes you anti-Zionist. No, there is a distinction. There's anti-Zionist. I'm anti-Zionist. Like, I'm just putting that out there. I don't think that any group of people deserve their own homeland, which is respected and created by third parties. So you go back to the Balfour Declaration and you move your way forward to eventually we have a United Nations, and we give Israel statehood by a third party and third and fourth party carving out a piece of land and giving it to a religious ethnic group, the only religious ethnic group that we have on the entire planet, by the way. No, it's obscene what happened. It's obscene.
I think the only way forward, though, Martin, is a two-state solution. I know you probably very disagree with that.
Well, I mean, we're never going to.
I think that's the only way
from the people. But the
what's that, sorry?
We're never going to take Israel away from the people. But the problem that you have with your two-state solution is, if you look at the map today, where does Palestine get their land from? Because Israel is not going to concede a square meter. So where are the Palestinians going to get their land? What are they going to do? Move them to Sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's like, is it like, pre-1948, which I think is a bit excessive, because then
never happen. It'll never happen. Israel will demolish every single bit of building and infrastructure.
You'd be surprised with some. It's difficult now because of the settlements, the illegal settlements.
The Israelis have become the Egyptians. The Palestinians, the new Jews.
No, they've become.
They're going to have to travel.
Become the Germans. They've become the Germans, because if you go back into the late 1930s, what the Germans did was they put all the Jews in the ghettos. That's where the ghetto comes from, is from that period in which they rounded them all up, they evicted them from their homes, they took their valuables, and they put them in ghettos. And that's exactly what Israel has been doing to Palestinians since even before 1948. They pushed 750,000 Palestinians out of their homes before 1948. They basically took siege of like 450 different villages and towns and laid waste to them and forced those people, talking about the Turks making the Armenians go on the forced march. Well, that's exactly what they did to the Palestinians before there even was a state of Israel.
And there are obviously people in Palestine who are older than the state of Israel. I mean, there are Palestinian coins. You can find them in museums, So, you can't say Palestine never existed, because it was a mandate under the British government. And then before that, it was a sanjak, which is basically a semi-autonomous zone of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, there was
they had some degrees of self-governance, not full independence.
What if it became something like the Vatican, except it was split between the three great religions? And I'm just talking about Jerusalem itself, like not Israel.
That's what Tayyip Erdogan said. He said the UN split between the three holy people.
You can't do that now because a couple of years ago, Trump fully supported Israel making Jerusalem the capital of their the traditional capital. And so that's what they've done. They closed the embassy, moved to Jerusalem. So Israel plans on taking Jerusalem. So, all of these little two-state solution things are never going to work until the government of Israel is replaced by people who have no chance of being replaced by right-wingers. And it's going to take probably a generation of like super socialist democratic governance in Israel before you could have a two-state solution.
And to be fair as
Which
well,
would include dividing land that Israel has
Yeah.
already possessed.
Yeah, and we were close to that as well. And also, to be fair, we need to get rid of some of the crazies in Palestine.
Well, they
as well,
killed
in
him, right? The
government,
last time we
especially
had one of those.
Hamas.
The last time we had what
Well,
was
they did. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And they
Yeah.
killed both sides of it.
Yeah.
Arafat. Yes,
Yeah.
Arafat, and also the Israeli Prime Minister then as well. They were very close on a peace deal,
Arafat was
and
just
died.
a retired terrorist. Like, let's make no mistake, Arafat
He
was.
was, yeah, he was no angel, was he?
He might have gotten a little soft in his old age, but well, we have Ehud Elmer. We had a couple of guys. Menachem Begin. Listen, Menachem Begin had a pretty colorful past, but he was a guy that you could work with. I mean, he worked with Israel with Egypt and made that happen.
Well, that's it. I mean, Israel has given up land before. I mean, they took the whole Sinai Peninsula and gave it up. And there are reasonable people. There are reasonable people in politics in Israel, as there are reasonable people in politics in Palestine as well. The only problem is the bloodthirsty, like Benjamin Netanyahu just craves this war, craves the bloodshed. I mean, he could have stopped the bombings a lot, like days ago, but no, he had to push and push on. Even like the world government saying, usually support Israel. We're like, oh, come on, mate, you're embarrassing us now.
Well, he's American.
I know, yeah.
So, I mean, since the ascendance of Netanyahu, there's the American, and even with the Obama, they had their differences, but deep down, the relationship has never been closer with America, as long, since Netanyahu, has been in charge,
It's so bad for the region.
Look at Biden. I mean, I've supported Biden pretty much all the way through so far. He's been in office like 5 months. But yeah, he was like, he just, saying, yes, Israel has a right to defend itself, the same old tired line.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, are you really thinking that, man?
But when Gaza put a ceasefire out, they put it out first. And they just ignored it. I mean, like, you think about that. That's just
Gaza said
you're killing children,
They said they only wanted two things, the Palestinians. They said, hey, keep your security and IDF forces out of the mosque, please do that. And also, for the 5 families, stop those evictions in Eastern Jerusalem. That would be great. If you could do those 2 things, that's all we're asking. And of course, Bibi's like, nah, brah, we're pushing on.
Especially when there was right-wing, like, fanatics, and they're the same as the people who were in Charlottesville, saying the Jews will not replace us. There were these bloody idiots, jumping up and down when the fucking mosque was burning. They're screaming like in Hebrew, their names will be erased.
Yeah,
like, what is wrong with them? Well, do you know what I mean? Like that's exactly the kind of vitriol kind of thing that their ancestors had to endure in Germany, and they're repeating it on a different level, like you said before.
They have short-term memories. Most of those people were never alive during the Holocaust. And didn't live in Germany in a concentration camp. And these are also people who, like Americans, they're not very well educated. They are the type of person that latches on to the first bit of information that gets told to them. And once they have that information in their brain, you cannot change it with new details or facts. And so they believe that the Palestinians are animal terrorists, and there's a lot of evidence in their education system, in their textbooks, on the news, in the newspapers that suggests that Palestinians are not fully people, right? Just like Africans in America during the time of slavery, they weren't allowed the full vote, right? That's a big problem, but I mean, what are we going to
just make my blood boil? They make my blood boil, these right-wing Israeli people jumping up and down when the mosque was burning, as much as those people in Charlottesville were, as much as the Taliban do. Do you know what I mean? Different cultures, but they're all just right-wing cancer. Like, you know,
There's
that's
an
what they are.
interesting.
They're living in a pressure cooker. You know, it's like, can you imagine living there? You know, it's a pressure cooker, and it's you just need a little, you know, little spark. You know, like they on South Park. You should watch that South Park episode where, when they're on the wall. But that's a few years ago now. But yeah, sorry, yeah.
There's this interesting intersection of white nationalism. On one hand, the old paradigm is the kind of like pro-Nazi, anti-Jewish white nationalism, but then there's another white nationalism which is kind of Proud Boys and other groups as well that are quite evangelical, and they are pro-Jewish but anti-people of color outside. So they're anti-Arab, they're anti-Black, they're anti-Mexican, but they're super pro-Jewish. And so they're racist too, but they're not racist against the Jews. And we have that interesting intersection where these two types of white nationalists merge together. And in the case of American evangelical movement, they are super pro-Israel, but super anti-people of color, right? So it's just this interesting reality that we have, must be said. Right, so what do we got here? We got a little bit of time left still. Anything else on our minds? We kind of...
Well, it's interesting. I was going to say that, like we mentioned the evangelicals and stuff. It's like, it's this prophecy.
That's why America.
No, that's it, because of the prophecy.
That's right.
Like, I'm sure you all know it, is the prophecy for Jesus to come back in, you know, part 2.
Yeah.
There needs to rebuild the temple, you know, but the problem is there's a mosque on the temple, so that needs to be knocked down, and then that will cause like a holy war, and then people believe it so much and want it to happen, but there is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy, really, isn't it? Like a lot of people got giddy when they saw that fire near the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah,
you know, and a lot of people, oh, is this the end times? You know, because that would, to the prophecy, that would be the next step to the end times.
But what if we need this conflict to keep going on? Because if there is a winner, that is an end time, you know?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
that is...
So, I don't know yet. And even though the logic is incredibly flawed, you know, in my opinion, the evangelical logic is flawed that, you know, Jesus will come back when Israel, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't want to die right now, you know, so I'm not ready. You know, I'm still young.
Let them fight, as they say in Godzilla.
You're not going to die, George. That's the thing, because you're not going to be raptured. So you will be left to live here on earth after all the Jews have been raptured. Because the Bible makes it clear, that's right, the Bible makes it clear that only 144,000 people, 12,000 people from the 12 tribes of Israel are being raptured. And they're going up into an object called heaven, which is only built to accommodate 144,000 souls. Now, you combine that with this idea that apparently the Pentagon really is going to disclose the UFO thing next month.
Yeah.
So they are keeping true to that. So we have, again, another intersection, to use that term, of the rapture, the idea that the Jesus story is really an extraterrestrial story. And we've all seen, or if you haven't, go on YouTube. There's some very interesting light activity that happens right in Jerusalem that's been caught on camera.
I saw it. It's the clearest version. By the way, guys, what are we going to talk about in this podcast?
Less than a minute.
We spoke about Israel last week.
Well, this is the podcast, bro.
Oh, you're recording this?
Yeah, I've been recording it for the last 40 minutes. So I want to thank my
guests, man, I didn't say anything.
Jake and Peter and George for another edition of One Chimp and Friends. You can watch on Anchor and of course on YouTube. So thanks everybody for coming out, and we'll catch you on the flip flop next time, where hopefully we'll have something as controversial to discuss as we do today.
Follow me on Instagram and Tinder.
Oh, and Grinder too, right? You got a Grinder account, didn't you?
I will.
There's a Grinder?
Yeah, right.